Welcome back, everyone. It is another Monday with Micah, and as I've been saying, that there would be some widowers on the show, and he is no longer a widower. You may remember him and his new wife, almost a year now. We're coming up on almost a year of their matrimony. But Howie said, this is Howie Soucek, everyone. He said, I have some things I'd like to share. I said, please, because we really the team want to see that this show, if you want to call it these interviews really are showing as many storylines as the Lord allows me to interview, and every walk of life, all the different walks in our grief stories. And so we want to hear from as many of you as possible in this walking through grief journey. And I'm going to start us with something that is not really maybe the direction, but something I want to bring up to the listeners here. Howie told me this. So Howie has known me for some time, and I think we met on the United Way board. Yes, that was really where the beginning of our friendship began, in the United Way. And then quickly we found out that I had just been coming into being a lover of words and what words can mean, and he resonated with that. That's a word he likes to use a lot. And so he has encouraged me all along the way before this widow walk was ever a thing. And he actually confirmed the name. Didn't you confirm it?
Yeah, we came over and had some fun with that.
And he brought me some of his writings and crossed out some words before we had made a decision on what this was going to be called. And he literally put, was it the Widow's Walk?
The Widow Walk.
And I'm like, I was like in shock. I was like, did we talk about this? And he's like, what? And I'm like, this is it. It's done. And so he didn't even, that's not really what you were coming over to discuss.
Mm-hmm.
But it stopped me in my tracks when I looked at what he gave me because of what he wrote down. And so, even though Howie is not on my board at this present time, he is a silent encourager, and now he's coming up front here today. But something he said to me, and this week this week in particular, it is coming to the forefront. And what do I mean by that? Howie said to me, Micah, the widow or widower's walk starts at diagnosis. Not once someone has passed.
Mm-hmm.
The beginnings of a widow or widower's walk really starts at diagnosis. And I'm like, you're right. I said, I can't take all this on, Howie. That's a lot, of need. That opens our portal of people to help for even bigger. And just in the last week, Judy Hawkins Dunn and myself have been in conversations with people that are getting diagnoses, and they are calling us. And I said, I knew this was coming. So Howie gave me a little bit of a heads up, and so I'm going to pass this on to him to let him tell you a little bit about his widow walk story. And why does it matter that he's here? Because we need to hear from a male perspective. He's walked with others after the loss of his wife through their journey into eternity as well. So he has seen it firsthand. So welcome, Howie.
Thanks, Micah. I didn't have to be thinking a whole lot about what to say, because it's so part of me that it is just going to flow out.
Yes.
I have lost about 41 people dear to me since the beginning of 2011.
Wow.
And 3 of them I was primary caregiver for during their terminal illness, and was with them at the moment they breathed their last breath.
Wow.
And I'm going to tell you about 2 of those today. And there's 2 or 3 places in what I have to say where I'm building upon something or reflecting on something that Micah has said in her first 2 books. In the midst of our grief, we praised God.
Yes.
This is something that I've reflected on, that, wow, that is how it was with me. So remember that as I go through. I'm not going to refer to it again, but you'll notice it. So the first person I want to mention is my dad. He was born on a homestead farm in north central Oklahoma. So imagine a kid walking around barefoot, feeding chickens and all that sort of thing, and all the values that a young person learns along the way, attending a one-room schoolhouse and that sort of thing. Everyone should know what life was like and how wonderful it was. Not just hard and difficult and trying, but how wonderful it was. So this man that grew up on that dirt farm, he went to the Naval Academy. He became an officer. He served in World War II on the New Jersey. He commanded 73 officers with 2,000 sailors on the New Jersey, one of our 4 fastest, meanest battleships toward the latter part of the war. And he went on after retiring from the Navy for a second career of 20 years. And he was married to my mom for many, many years. And my mom died as a result of dementia. It was dragged out over some years. And it was very sad. And my dad and my mom manifest for me the best example of what a loving relationship is. And so I learned from that. When she died, Linda and I looked at each other. We said, he's got to come live with us.
Wow.
By then, our boys were off to college, and our house is not big. But we made a place for him. And he lived with us 6 or 7 years. And he was going down to Coffee Klatch in his car at Fred's restaurant every week, and he was on the internet. I taught him how to use the internet, and he was exchanging emails and pictures with cousins all over the country and relatives all over the world, right up to his 98th birthday on December 30 of 2011, when he fell ill on his 98th birthday. Up to that point, he was just
on his
amazing.
98th birthday.
98th birthday.
Wow.
He fell ill, and I got him into the emergency room, and they had him up in ICU, and it was determined he was terminally ill, and we resolved to go with hospice care. And I told them I want to be trained on everything. So I made myself responsible for his oxygen concentrator and the vacuum equipment for removing foam from his mouth and whatnot, and all his meds, morphine included. I was his primary caregiver.
Wow.
And 10 days after he fell ill, he died.
Wow.
And in my and I witnessed his last breath,
Mm.
and knew that that was his last breath.
Mm.
And 15 seconds or a half a minute after that, you may have heard the expression, the color goes out of their face.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like this.
Mm.
Just like that, the color went out of his face, and I realized, oh, the heart stops after he stops breathing. And I had talked with him a lot when he was unconscious that during that day, and science pretty much it has established that a person hears you
Yes.
even if they're unconscious.
Yes.
And I told him how much he meant to me
Mm.
and how grateful I was. Well, when he died, my brother was with me, and we joined hands at the moment of his death, and we prayed our gratitude
Mm.
for this man, our father.
Wow.
And so he was gone. And 2 or maybe 3 months after he died, Linda and I were attending my brother's place up in Middlesex County, some kind of party. There weren't many of us, but it was a lot of family was there. And my niece was there. My niece was a nurse practicing at the time, and Linda and I were talking and whatnot, and she said, you know, Linda, I've noticed that you're missing a word every now and then. You're using the wrong word, and I think you should see a doctor about that.
Wow.
And so we thought about that, and we had noticed it too, and figured it was just a result of stress. Linda and I had been married 45 years,
Mm.
and she was a classroom teacher, English at all that time. She was here a bunch of years at Franklin High School,
Mm-hmm.
and considered an outstanding.
Yeah, I still
Teacher.
remember the teacher's student's favorite teacher
Mm-hmm. Oh,
year after year.
yes.
I mean, I remember that even. I remember that being
Mhm.
said even
Mhm.
back then.
Yes.
Right.
But she retired that year, 2011.
Mm.
Her last couple years teaching had been pretty stressful for her as a teacher.
Mm-hmm.
Not because of the students,
Mhm.
whom she loved,
Mm-hmm.
not because of her immediate supervisor,
Mm.
her principal, Travis Feltz, whom she loved
Mm.
and considered him the best principal she ever had.
Wow.
But there were other factors involved with her stress
Mm-hmm.
during her last couple of
Mhm.
years. So we were figuring this was stress, but as soon as we got home from my brother's, we decided let's go
Look into
check
this.
in with Dr. Mike
Wow.
Ponder. And we went to him the next day,
Wow.
and we talked about the problem and had a good conversation, and we were saying it was probably stress and whatnot. He said, yeah, it probably is, but let's do a CT scan just to be sure.
Mm.
And did that afternoon. And next morning, Mike comes over and he says, Linda, you have a 2-inch by 3-inch oblong tumor in your left temporal lobe of your brain.
Wow.
Let's call that a shocker.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, here's what I want to do. I want to send this CT scan down to someone I know, the head of neurosurgery at Duke University Hospital,
Wow.
and get his analysis. And he did that and heard back that afternoon.
Wow.
And he was told, I want an MRI now. And we did an MRI that next day in the morning, and Mike sent that result electronically to Duke and heard back immediately, I want her down here now for emergency brain surgery.
Wow. Mm.
So we went down that night, and we got down there after midnight, at Duke University, and
this is unheard of, really, in the scheduling of things, typically.
well, he scheduled the surgery for the next day. At the end of a full schedule of surgeries, he added us on in the early evening.
Wow. But do you understand what I'm saying? Like, usually if there's a concern,
yeah,
it's a slower to get to each step than what you're telling me.
yeah. Well, this was now,
Right.
at every step. So we were there, and I've got another whole story I could tell about our experience there with that first brain surgery. But there turned out to be 3 brain surgeries.
Wow.
During 2012. And remember, this is right after my dad died. And
You didn't even get 3 months before
No.
the next crisis really
and we
happened.
both had retired 2011. And,
Wow.
and we had plans for our retirement together.
Mm-hmm.
But with my dad's death and then Linda's diagnosis and what was laying in front of us,
That was a full-time job.
it was absolutely. So after Linda's second brain surgery, I had my 2 boys, who were adults at the time, at the house visiting with us, and I said, Linda was resting in the back room, and I said, guys, I want to sit down, I want to talk with you about how I'm navigating this. And I like that word navigation, because rather than like how I'm handling or coping, because those words tend to make like I'm a victim, or something is controlling me.
Thank you.
And when I use the word navigation, it's I'm controlling the problem. I have a plan, I know where to go.
You're being guided through.
I'm being guided.
Right.
And so I started telling them, in essence, my wife of 45 years is dying. And my life is going to end as I know it. And I'm going to launch something entirely different. And I said, guys, every once in a while I'm falling into a pit.
Wow.
And it's a pit of self-pity and sadness, where this pit is like deep and it's pitch black down at the bottom, and I feel like I'm dead and feeling sorry for myself, and woe is me, and my wife's dying, and I'm flesh and bone, and I hurt, and I'm worried, and I don't know what to expect, and it's horrible. And so this is dark pit, and I might be down there crying for anywhere from like a half a minute to 5-6 minutes, and then I don't like being down there. And so I just, at the bottom of this pit, I look up, and there's this blue rim. It's like the song, Beyond the Blue Horizon. It's my blue horizon. And I told them, this is where my blessings are. I see my blessings in this beautiful pale blue rim at the above of my rim. I'm looking up to this, kind of like you raise your eyes to the hills. It's like that. And I started rattling off a few examples of my blessings. And I said, my blessings are uncountable. And there's tons of little ones, and there's some really big ones too. But with all of them, I know the source.
It's good.
Of these blessings. I know the source. And recognizing my blessings and knowing the source lifted me up out of the pit every time.
Wow.
And very quickly.
Wow.
And I told them, now I know I'm going to fall in that pit again and again and again, because I'm bone and flesh, and I hurt, and so I'm going to fall into my pit of self-pity repeatedly. I know that, but every time I just look up
And to pull you
and
out.
I'm lifted up.
Lifted up.
I'm lifted up.
Can you speak into, would you say that these moments of pitfall or in those pits, would you use the term depression in some of that? Can you speak into...
No.
You don't
When I think
feel-
of depression, I think of a psychological phenomenon.
Okay.
And for me, there's something going on that's more profound than that.
Okay. Good. Look, I'm just asking questions because
When
it
I
helps us learn.
When I use the word death, I'm not talking about a physical death.
Right.
When I'm in the bottom of my pit, it's like death. It's a profound death. And so depression, I think psychology, but this is something different. I feel distance from God because when I'm feeling sorry for myself and I'm in the bottom of my pit, when I say death, that means my back is turned to God.
Turned.
And I am alone in the worst way.
Right.
And so I have to make a conscious decision
To turn around. To look up.
to bring God into my consciousness, to be conscious of the presence of God, and to praise God. Because when I realize my blessings, I'm filled with peace and joy and praise. I praise the source. So in the midst of my grief,
Yes.
I praise God. That's an example of what you said in your book, rings true for me. So this is something I wanted to share with them to help them, know how I navigate this. And
That's a tool. That's a skill.
Oh, yes, you learn it and you get better at it.
Right.
You get better
You
at
get
it.
quicker at becoming aware.
But as long as I am flesh and bone, I'm going to fall in my pit. And the thing now, Micah mentioned that I'm married, coming up on May 4. May the 4th be with you, right? I still fall into my pit. And I know there are those who would feel uncomfortable being married to someone who falls into such a pit as that. Uncomfortable, which could manifest itself in any of a number of different ways.
Right.
But what does my new wife do? She rushes to me and puts her arms around me, arms of God's love, comforting me.
Yes. That's another gift.
Oh, you're telling me.
That's a big gift.
It's incalculable.
As he said.
So then Linda had a third surgery, and then we had a big milestone coming up, November 5 that year, 2013, which was going to determine, okay, we're going to look at all the chemotherapy results and everything, and the PET scan's going to look for really tiny bits of return of this cancer, and we'll know whether or not the chemo worked. And glioblastoma is a brain cancer that it's lethal. All radiation therapy and chemo can do, such as Linda had, is buy you time of meaningful life, and which it did, and we're very grateful for that. But she was terminally ill, and the PET scan was going to confirm how, whether or not that was going to be the case. And we went down to Duke University for that, and I'll never forget when they gave us the results of the PET scan, meaning that the chemo had failed. I'll never forget the expression on Linda's face and what my expression must have been when we turned and looked at each other, hearing those results. And so they offered an experimental chemo that we could try. It was so experimental they didn't really have much in the way of results as yet. And we agreed to give it a shot. And so that was early November. And so they wanted us doing blood work pretty often and seeing our oncological person to administer the chemo with the fresh results of the blood work. And Linda and I talked about what was going to happen, and if the blood work for this next visit for chemo was going to come up showing that this new experimental chemo wasn't working either, and so the end is near. We talked about it ahead of time, and we said, so we're going to go on hospice, and we're going to be at home, and we're going to be comfortable, and we're going to enjoy each other's company in the presence of God's love.
Yep.
And so did the blood work, went to the oncologist, and he gave us the results and asked us, do you want to go ahead with the chemo again? And we said, no, we're ready for hospice. So he wrote that up, and we went off the 2 chemos she was on and went home and set up an appointment right away with hospice. And I told them I want to do everything, all the meds, whatever's required, and be her primary caregiver. They trained me, and so I was in a position to do that. And
what do you think gave you the strength to be able to? Did you believe before that point, obviously walking through your story with your dad, facing mortality is very painful. How were you able to continue to face it? Because you had a task?
I imagine, I wonder if it's like a soldier in war, and you're facing an enemy, and it's hand-to-hand combat or whatever. You're trained, you know what to do, and it's terrifying and horrible, but you do what you have to do. You've got this momentum.
Okay.
And with me, it's a spiritual thing.
It's a
as
sacred
I talked
experience
with my boys about what was moving me forward and how I was able to navigate the terminal illness of my wife, it was like that. That here we are in our last days, and it's the same momentum with the same force that's leading me through this with a steady hand.
Yes.
I'll fall apart later, kind of thing.
Okay.
Right?
Yep.
So it was maybe I don't know, it was getting closer to Christmas, and her sister was grievously ill with cancer at the time. She was close to her final days at this same time. Her mother had died about a year earlier. Linda was sitting in a chair in her last days, and she wanted a little something to eat. I got her half a banana. She wanted a little something to drink, a half a glass of milk, and that was the last she ever ate or drank. And it was the last she was ever awake. She was tired, and she wanted to go to bed and rest. And so I helped walk her in there. She was not walking well at that point, and she fell asleep. Had her in our own bed, and she stayed asleep all night, and she was asleep all day the next day. She was unconscious, and so I was consulting with the doctor about the use of the medications, and so our medication dosages changed. We knew it was getting close, and the day after that, I had both my boys there and my granddaughter. She was about 9 at the time, and Linda was still unconscious, of course, and it was late afternoon or evening, and I went into the kitchen. I left Matt, my son, back with Linda, and my son Alan was with his daughter in the next room, and I went into the kitchen and I just prayed. I said, Lord, please take her now in your arms. It's time. And I walked back into the bedroom, and I knelt down by her side, and she was on her right side, and I knelt down facing her. And I said, Linda, your mom and sister, they're up there going like this. They're waiting. They're ready. And I'm going to be okay. And I love you. And I was in the habit of saying the word always 3 times when I told her I loved her. And so I told her always the first time and the second time. When I said always the third time, she was exhaling her last breath. It was so long, her long last breath, in answer to my prayer.
Quickly.
And so I wept deeply for, I don't know, a minute. And Alan came in, and my granddaughter, Jana. And after crying, just all of a sudden, I wasn't thinking about anything. I didn't make any decision to do this, but I felt like some kind of tree, and this wind came, and it was fresh and cool and bracing, filling me.
Powerful.
And I stood up, and I just praised God for this blessing.
Yes.
And I realized that my tears had morphed from sorrow and self-pity, which is understandable.
Totally.
And right. I never feel bad about my tears of sorrow and self-pity. But they had morphed into tears. I felt peace and joy because I was so grateful. This gift, 45 years of this relationship with this person in my life. How do you thank the source well enough for that?
Wow.
And so I felt so good. And we joined hands and prayed our thankfulness for this, for their mother, for my wife, and the gift that we had received. And again, in the midst of our grief, we praise God. And I still fall into my pit. Every once in a while, not as often, but to my dying day, I'll be a griever. And in spite of the fact that here I am, I'm married unexpectedly. Neither of us planned this. Well, you've seen the video, perhaps, and we've told our story.
That's right.
And we're sticking with it.
That's it.
And this, how could I be gifted again with
unmerited favor
love
and grace?
It's just, neither of us, we would say, the flesh says, this came out of nowhere, but we know
the source.
And by the way, the human brain, in my opinion, the human brain, the best it can do is to believe and to have faith in something it cannot comprehend.
That's good.
I like the word know. That's my spirit knows the source, knows love. The brain doesn't have a clue.
Now, I mentioned this on Saturday, and Howie was I'm thankful that Howie was at our first ever Saturday gathering, and it was pretty electric in there.
Mm-hmm.
And I was flying high the rest of the day, just so you know. Just all of it. But anyway, something that I've been pondering recently, and I want to ask you your interpretation of this thought of it's an honor to grieve. And we may even title this here today, because his way of articulating these stories, you've been honored to be able to have walked with these people in such depth for so long, and to have been the caregiver that you're, even in the pitfalls that you've mentioned, the reflection on all of it still puts you in an overwhelm of gratitude.
Yes.
So can you unpack that thought? And this is a new thought for me, to say that it's an honor to grieve. Can you elaborate on that statement?
Well, if it's a new thought for you, it's a new thought
Well,
for me too.
I feel like all that he's been saying, I would summarize in that it's an honor to grieve. But now that I'm presenting that as a thought, he does like to ponder things a little bit longer, to come, because his words matter to him, and therefore he doesn't want to just say things flippantly. He wants to ponder and then speak from the heart.
Yes. I think words are really important, and when you think about to grieve is to honor, to be honored.
Yeah, it's honoring.
It hinges on the notion of grief, the concept of grief. Grief is not a simple concept.
No, complex.
With
Multi-layered.
me, I see there is an ironic division between the flesh and the spirit. It's ironic because there's this division, and yet God is in us. We are of God. We are one with God. And so that defeats the idea that we're separated. But that's an ironic truth.
Right.
So if I suffer in grief, then that's the flesh.
Yes.
When I rejoice in grief because of my gratitude to God, that is an honor.
Yes, this is good.
That's an honor.
Right.
I'm honoring God by praising God as surely as God has honored me with his gifts.
Of people.
Yes.
That matter.
Endless.
And this is the beauty, and I'm unpacking this, okay? So this is a new of like, how can we reframe? And he's bringing some parallels here, because we are living in both. We are in the tension of the carnal part of ourselves and the spiritual part of ourselves. And, you know, for us that are professors of faith, we really want to be led more by the Spirit. And we can even say, I will say that that our spirit is grieved. And the grief and the sadness, I'm learning that our physical body also has to metabolize the grief, meaning that we don't just feel sadness in our mind, we feel sadness in our heart. And sadness or pain, you know, pain is a form of grief. Part of the manifestation of grief, pain is typically attached. Well, pain has more than one dimension, folks. And I'm studying this a little bit further to have more language for us to break apart a little bit. How do you take the density of pain and metabolize that so that you are not in a state of constant heartbreak, constant distress, constant fight or flight survival state, which is kind of what can happen in the beginning if we're not ready for it. Now, he, in both of these instances, was preparing for death in a sense. Now, for some of us, like myself, it was sudden death.
Mm-hmm.
So there was really no preparation. And the experience has been vastly different.
Mm-hmm.
But I really feel like to die is gain.
Oh, yeah.
You know?
Yes. Yeah.
And I'm the more I lean into loving people, the more expressions of the heart that start to blossom out and bloom out, and there's some new songs that I'm working on, and there's songs of ascent.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's people whose spirits are about to send off, and I can feel that, and it hurts my heart. Okay, so I feel grief. I'm grieving for people while they're still here, but yet for me, thankfully, he allows me to go to my piano, and there's an invitation where there's a locomotive called a piano, and it allows me to drive somewhere in the spirit, or I say catch the river. You know, it's a river type of a, you know, it's like a float. You know, the piano's kind of like a float, so I'm trying to catch the river. And then I start flowing in the river, and you never know where it's going to go or what melody's going to find you, and then how, and so these are the interesting intricacies of the outlets that can come from deeply leaning into the grief, and I feel like even being the gratitude is really an offering.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
Can you speak into that? Like you're daily giving an offering. You're still doing that, would you say?
Every morning before sunup, I'm out in the yard, and I want to see first light, and I want to hear the first bird song, and I'm giving thanks to manifestation of God's love through our creation gift. There's many different ways that God's love is manifest, and it's in every here and now. So being thankful is something that is integral.
Yes.
If we could, if we were able, it'd be every moment of every day,
right.
Because that's when our blessings are present.
Right.
That's when God's presence is. But I wanted to.
And you know you're renewing your brain.
Oh yeah.
Thankfulness is part of growing new neural pathways.
Mm-hmm.
Neuroplasticity. We can do new things. We can grow new pathways in our brain, and this is fascinating to me too. But you think, okay, you could have gone into deep fear about your own mortality, or what if this happens to me?
Mm-hmm.
Did that happen?
No.
Why were you not concerned about your own mortality when you've been facing death all these years?
Well, I know
41 different fronts.
I know my body is going to pass away anyway.
How do you not fear death when you face so many deaths?
I've said before that I do not want. I don't want to die, but I do not fear death. I'm ready to be dead. I've told my boys this a lot. I'm ready to be dead. It doesn't mean I want to die, because since I'm living in God's love, I want to keep living, right? Even though there's tremendous suffering in the world. But I'm ready to be dead, because I know what I know.
Well, has your wife given you a new leash on life? I mean, has your wife given you a new leash on life?
Yeah, but I was, and I've told her too, I was happy in the dozen years after Linda died because of my relationship with God.
Right.
Happy, because still blessed, and uncountably so. So, a great deal to live for.
Yes.
So no, I wouldn't. like ready to die or anything like that.
Well,
But
as we finish
I
up,
wanted to add,
yes,
step one
thank you.
for me is pray,
Thank you.
which is to be have a
Constant
consciousness
prayer.
of God's presence.
Thank you.
A consciousness of God's presence, and there's a communication that takes place. And I like to expel
Speak it
my
out.
words, speak my words aloud, and I hear an answer with ears that
That are in your heart.
yes.
Yes.
Thank you. That's step one, and it can be dozens and dozens of times every day.
What's step two?
Step two is trust,
Mm.
and that if you need something, if you're worried about something, and whatever, step one is to pray.
Yes.
Step two is trust, and what I mean by trust is to know,
Yes.
not to hope.
That's thank you.
Hope is not the right word. It's to know all will be well.
Yes.
And it in God's time, whenever,
Yes.
however, things are going to be just fine.
Fine.
I know that
Yes.
better than
You
I
your
know
hand.
this is my brain knows this is my right hand, and I
Mhm.
can do measurements and feel pain and all that stuff. But
It's a deeper than
that's
that.
my brain.
Yes.
Knowing the truth is different, and that's a
Mhm.
spiritual thing. So pray, know that all will be well, no matter what happens in the world.
That's right.
Um,
Or in your
No.
world.
yes. Step three. Realize that I'm going to be back in the world suffering, and there's going to be something else that I'm going to worry about.
Yes.
Some other pain I'm going to experience. Some other person I'm going to be concerned about who's suffering.
Yes.
And there's a world of those. I have a young woman that's like a daughter in Kiev, in Ukraine, and with a 5-year-old son, alone, with bombs going off in the night, and it's just horrible. We think we got troubles, and so I pray, I know, and then I'm back in the world of suffering, and then it's time to start the cycle over again and pray. And it's just, the thing is, the good is so overwhelming.
Exactly.
It overwhelms the bad.
The bad. That's right.
It's simple.
Right.
It really does. That doesn't make the bad go away, and I still hurt and I suffer and I worry and all, but I don't know, there's this goodness that is everywhere.
Vast.
It overwhelms.
Yes, overwhelms, overrides.
Yeah.
I've been studying prayer even this past weekend as he's mentioning some things where more suffering's happening and loved ones are going through things and we want answers. You know, I'm like, what can we do? Because when there's diagnosis that's terminal, you feel kind of helpless to the process. Now, there is a process. You went through a process. You tried different things, and it still kind of ended up at what we could call on this side a dead end. But really, the road doesn't end because there's an on-ramp to another road that he wasn't allowed to go on yet. And, but I've been reading in the scripture about prayer that's sacrificial. A sacrificial prayer. And it took me to the Garden of Gethsemane, which was where Jesus prayed to the point that capillaries in his body were dripping blood, which is a level of stress that you can do that. And that I want to encourage you, the listener, don't pray passively when we are walking with ones in deep sorrow. When there is terminal illness involved, that our God is limitless to what he is capable of doing. And he doesn't always heal them. Okay? So our prayer may not end up the way we want, which is for them to remain here for longer, because we don't really want to walk through this life without them. And their suffering ends. So you walk with them observing suffering, and yes, there was a level of suffering in the walking with, but then there's continued suffering after they're gone.
Mm-hmm.
And
wow, that's another story that I'll share with you sometime, one way or the other.
Yes.
That in the first year after Linda passed away, I had a vision.
Wow.
Of her, and I know where she is.
Yes.
And I know that she's in a state of joy.
And forevermore.
There is not the slightest shred of doubt in my mind about that.
And I'm thankful for many stories that have those glimpses to know without a shadow of a doubt where they are, and that they're in the best place they could ever be.
Absolutely.
And so back to, it's an honor to grieve. We have the honor to pray prayers that are passionate, pray prayers that activate things that we can't see.
Yeah.
And I am going to be bold enough to say this in this current season, because I'm declaring some things on this show. My music used to be called Micah D, and a friend of mine said that's Micah Declare, D for declare. That I believe we serve a God that in our obedience to pray for others, that there are going to be times that we receive a manifestation of healing ourselves. It is not a bipartisan, but in our loving act to pray, God's sovereignty can heal us of things inside of ourselves.
Yes.
And that person we're praying for may not get the healing the way we want.
It's the sending. In the sending comes the mending.
The mending. Thank you. Back to the book. And so it's a message. It's a message that is so profound that we have to explain it.
Yeah.
But in the sending, which is the obedient thought, the obedient action, to send a text to that person, to that the awareness that Howie talked about, that really that is our spirit-led living, is to constantly be checking in with what more do you have for us today? How best can we serve our fellow man? And a lot of times in the widow community, it's a phone call.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, you were thinking about me today? That pit that he was talking about, when someone else sends a text to say, hey, I was thinking of you and just wanted to say I love you. That may be the little yellow stream, the blue rim that lifts them out. We are part of the mending team.
Yeah, absolutely.
We send and we allow the Holy Spirit to mend. That he's the mender. We're not the healer. We're really not the rescuer. I'm a recovering rescuer. But meaning we can't take the credit for the good that comes.
Right.
Because God's giving us good thoughts. And those good thoughts are from him. And our job is to be the willing vessel to give it away. Howie is an example of giving himself away 41 times now, walking with close friends, some very close, face to face in the hospice season of this. And he still is encouraging up to do it again.
God's doing this work through us, but we have to choose.
Thank you.
For that to happen.
That's good. That's good.
We have to choose to do that.
So can we end with that? Can you say that one more time? Because some of these deep thoughts we have to repeat so they start to sink in a little bit. Because the brain is kind of a squirrely thing sometimes.
There are many manifestations of God's love. Through our creation gift, we can witness it.
Yeah.
There's some, you probably know the chapter and verse in the Bible where there's no excuse for not believing in God.
Yes, in God.
Because the evidence is all
around us.
But another way the evidence is around us is through our relationships. God's love is manifest through our loving relationships, and directly through
with Him,
being aware of the presence of God, and
yes,
communing with God.
yes.
So there's 3 ways that we have that. And what was I starting to say?
You were telling about, oh Lord, see now, well, I don't know, we both having a senior moment. I was talking about,
I got an excuse.
I don't know what I have.
I'm 78.
I was talking about the tools of accepting some of that. So I've lost my train of thought, and he had it.
Yeah, that it's a choice.
Yes, thank you. That's right.
So in our relationships, we can
Being the vessel.
Yeah,
That's what we were
it's
talking
amazing. Free will is an awesome personal responsibility.
Yes.
And we can turn our back on God 24/7.
Right.
It's
yes.
you know, when we let the selfishness take us over, then we're turning our back on God.
Yes.
And that's a choice.
Yes.
It is a choice.
And I say that even with our salvation walk. You know, I've said this to the Father in worship, that I choose you again. You know, that's what we do in our marriage. I mean, we have these vows, but there's days where you really don't like that person, you know, and you're not really feeling very lovey towards them for whatever the reason may be. But there's a choice inside of us to say, I'm going to choose in again. And we can parallel this with our relationship with the Heavenly Father, because we're not in a religion, okay? We're not considering this a religion. It's a relationship.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely, a relationship.
Yes.
Yeah. I have a notion of what religion is, and it's not
Right.
applicable.
No. And it's a surface level of our relationship, and relationship goes deeper. And grief and loss is kind of an open door for those willing to take the invitation to a deeper level of matters of the heart, of feeling things within our heart, allowing ourselves to feel things. And as I said in one of the recent videos, that I purposed within myself to feel it so that He could heal it. I was not going to do the coping, as you said, and the other ways. He used the term navigating. And we're spiritually navigating through life. And that can be a dance, or it can be a landmine. And you're tiptoeing around waiting for the next bomb, and you're always kind of on this anxiety-ridden state that, like, which step? You know, and that's not peaceful. And your body will start to not respond well to heightened long-term stress.
What I'm aware of is that this is a developmental process, and that you know, I gave the 7 pray and and no, and then back to reality. But it's worldly reality, and start the cycle over. It is a growth process where you learn something. Learn isn't quite the right word. You get better, you get closer and closer to God. Every time something bad happens and you pray about it, you are helped to whatever extent you realize it or not.
Yes.
And you are growing closer with God.
Every step.
I think that's why we're here.
Yes.
And a lot of it is through our relationships with one another that we help each other.
Yes.
It's really God helping us to help each other.
Yes.
Like the Widow Walk, the grief organization, we're nurturing each other, and we're growing closer to God in the process.
In the process, thank you.
And so we hurt, and we pray, and we nurture each other.
That's
and
right.
we get a little closer to God in the process.
That's right.
That's why we're here.
And that kind of lifts the heaviness.
Yeah.
And you know, and the benefits of a marriage is that when one's down, usually the other isn't, so they can help lift, and you keep leveling up. And so thank you, Howie, for bringing up the points that the Widow Walk it may be called the Widow Walk, but it is for the widower as well, and we really encourage the widowers to become a part. There is a widower at every meeting, pretty much, y'all. Just so you know, this is not a girls group by default, even though, for whatever reason, gentlemen, the men are not withstanding as long as the women. But Howie is a representative to say that the men can stand in the midst of loss, and they're not always the first to go. So thank you for watching. I hope you've made it to the end of the video, and because this one is an hour long, Howie, as I expected, because we're both verbal processors. So all that to say, I did this on the last video, and so I'm gonna do it again. If there was something that you loved that he said, comment below, share this with your friends. Why am I doing this? Because I'm convinced that the Widow and Widower's Walk is worthy of sharing, to explore matters of the heart, to hear the vastness of these storylines. I'm telling you, y'all, it's a book that's worth reading. And guess what? We're living stones telling these stories. And this testimony, you know, a book of testament, all the things. So we can't continue because we can continue, okay? We're going to shut this off. It could continue to go on because minds spark each other, and another thought, and another thought, and another thought. And so I'm aware of that. So for the betterment, we are going to let you go. But thank you for listening. Please go online. You can find this on our YouTube channel. You can find this on our Facebook page. And the main place I would say is the widowwalk.org. Under the Grief Expressions tab, Mondays with Micah is there. If you are interested in coming on the show, then show yourself. Drive on over here, and we would like to have a conversation with you, because it is an honor to me to be able to sit with people of such depth. It's filling my love tank having these conversations. If I could have said that my life would be talking to people, walking through loss, and it's growing my relationship with the Lord.
Yes.
Like, yeah. Do you see that? Like, I can't even put it into words. The magnitude of this opportunity. And so we have to continue, because it's just too beautiful not to uncover the face and the names and the pain and the glory and the goodness and the mystery. I mean, it's a limitless conversation, y'all. So that gives me the freedom to continue to explore as many people that I come in contact with. And we are just getting started. So thank you. See you next time.